Morning, Andy. Or afternoon. We're
Hey,
getting close. We're getting close to
almost
afternoon.
there. Yeah. Morning. How you doing?
But how about yourself?
Oh, doing well. Not bad. So I've never been so happy to have mid 70s in my life.
Mm,
You're nice and cool on the coast, I guess, but still.
yeah. No, that 98 yesterday was toasty.
Yeah, it was. I'm having like the house that I purchased has so many plants and tree and fruit trees around it. Everything started to wilt, and I was like, oh my gosh. I haven't even had a chance to like barely water them. Oh, felt so bad. Hot.
They'll be resilient, I'm sure. You can skip a watering. I just wouldn't skip it for the whole summer.
Yeah, I know. If only. We are lucky being in this environment. It rains most of the year. Down from Southern California, I used to have to water everything all the time. It was
Yep.
horrible, actually. But anyway, so
So just a heads up, Andy, I'm gonna have to jump off around 1 today, but I should be here up until then, but just to give you
okay.
that heads up.
Sounds good. Yeah, we very well might. We're just doing the presentation from the working group today after the brief discussion ahead of the staff report. So we actually might be done by 1. Hey, Jennifer, nice to see you. Nice background there. I like it.
Yeah, it's our official background.
I was gonna
Everybody
say,
has the same one. I want something different, but
huh. It looks good though. I mean,
yeah,
it
I like
is
it.
cool.
It is actually really cool
Uh-huh.
background. Hey, I thought when we do roll call, can I go ahead and introduce Kate really quick?
Yeah, maybe
Kate Thompson.
maybe we'll do roll call. I'm wondering if I should ping to you first before I do the roll call. That way you have the opportunity.
Fine.
Yeah.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, we'll do a roll call. I'll when Chad pings to me, I'll ask you to introduce Kate real quick.
Okay.
And then because you said Kate will fill in for you when you're on
Yeah.
fire duty, which is unfortunately around the corner here.
I know. I was on call through last night and I was like super excited I didn't get called out.
Mm.
Not quite ready yet.
No, no. I mean, I only been in Oregon
So
for
dry
three
already.
3 years now. I've been here, but it feels like this is unseasonably warmer sooner than it should. At least the last
Yeah.
2 years, it waited till like July to get hot, hot.
Yeah. Right. I agree.
We also just
Other,
didn't have the rain like we usually do. It wasn't very wet.
We didn't get the
mhm.
spring rain. It felt
Yeah,
like it just
We
went
didn't.
from winter to summer and just skipped the entire spring season.
that's how I
Yeah,
felt too.
that's a good
Yeah.
point. We didn't get like any spring rain.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, nice to see you. Oh, you're muted there.
Never fails. Thanks. How are you doing?
Doing good. Nice to see you
Good.
got a new background there. A little different
Yeah,
area, huh?
figured I'd channel a bit of John Day Canyon. So
Oh, John Day.
yeah,
Nice. That's awesome. Hey there, Kate. Nice to kind of virtually see you face to face here. You'll be filling in for Jennifer
Yeah,
as needed. I'm here. Well, welcome.
good to be here. Thanks.
Mark,
Hello.
how you doing?
Doing good. How about you today?
Doing well. Doing well. Oh, there's Chad. Perfect. I was gonna ask. I think you're filling just to confirm you'll be filling in for Chad in a bit if he has to step away for a bit.
Yeah, he mentioned that, so that's fine.
Great. Thank you, everyone, taking the time. Morning, Chad.
Hi, Andy. I think we have just officially left morning and we are about to be afternoon.
Yes, and I think we're about ready to start. Before I do it, Joe, if you wouldn't mind, your last name, Liebezeit, is that correct? Liebezeit?
Yeah, you nailed it.
Oh, great. Thanks to
You
Google
must know some
pronunciation.
German.
Well, no. I just sat and listened to the pronunciation software for quite a while. But all right. Appreciate that. All right, Chad, we are recording. We can go ahead and start the meeting when you're ready.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So we will convene the meeting of the Private Forest Accord Mitigation Advisory Committee. And the first part of our agenda, can you lead us through roll call?
Yes, before you get into roll call, we just have one update from ODF. Jennifer's, I was going to ping her. She's going to mention someone who will fill in for her as needed.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I have joining me today, and she'll be on future meetings as well as Kate Thompson. She's my counterpart at ODF on HCP work. Essentially, I have a standing conflict at 1 o'clock for these meetings, so she'll fill in for the last part. And then also I'm on a fire team, so if I'm gone this summer, she'll be able to fill in, and by having her here, it'll be a seamless transition. So I just wanted to introduce her. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I'll continue with roll call with Jennifer present today. But moving forward, I'll add Kate as needed. And as Kate, if I forget, you're welcome to speak up and say you're filling in. But I'll add you. Alrighty. So I'll call your name. Please respond in the affirmative if you are present today. Chad Washington.
Here.
Mark Stern.
Here.
Joe Liebesite.
Here.
Scott Lightcap.
Here.
Courtney Greisel.
Here.
Fran Cafarata. Andrew Perky.
Here.
Mark Grandbreimer.
Here.
Jennifer Weichel.
Here.
Kate Wells.
Here.
Sarah Gregory. I don't believe we have anyone filling in. Chris Allen has retired from his position effective about 2 weeks ago, I believe. I don't believe anyone's present from Fish and Wildlife Service right now. Okay. All right, Chad, I will hand it back to you.
Great. Thanks, Andy. So next we've got the approval of the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to see the agenda and review it? Seeing heads nodding, so we'll just consider that approved unless there's any request to have edits or changes. Okay, we'll consider that approved. Now, Andy, in between that item and our consent agenda, we do want to welcome Joe to the committee and maybe hear from Joe a little bit about what interested you in joining the committee and a little bit of your background, and then we can introduce ourselves to you as well, Joe.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chad. I appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Joe Liebesite. I'm the statewide conservation director for Bird Alliance of Oregon. And I think what really attracted me to this position is I've been engaged in some forest conservation work over the years, both federally, statewide, and now private. And my predecessor, Bob Salinger, who you all know, and rest his soul, I know that he was in this role, and I know that we are a signatory on the Private Forest Accord, and so just honored to be part of this group, and look forward to working with you all. So a little bit about my background. So as I said, I'm statewide conservation director. So we have programs across the state from coast to Eastern Oregon. So there's several staff folks I supervise on conservation work, from anything like marine reserves and rocky habitat protection on the coast, plover monitoring on the coast, forest work, mostly on the coastal forests. And then in Eastern Oregon, we're doing work in Malheur, Klamath, and other landscapes out there. So kind of a broad sweep of conservation work. Prior to that, I worked for a different NGO, the Wildlife Conservation Society, which is a conservation arm of the Bronx Zoo. I did work there up on the Arctic coastal plain for 12 years, looking at impacts from oil development on nesting birds, and advising the oil industry on best ways to minimize impacts. I have a science background, but more and more in my career in the latter years, more recently, I'm shifting to policy work and spending too much time in Salem. So I'll stop there.
Great. Well, thanks for introducing yourself, Joe, and welcome to the committee. We're excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Next, I'll go to Courtney. Do you want to introduce yourself? Who you represent?
Sure. My name is Courtney Griesel. I am with Sierra Pacific Industries. So we're a timberland owner and wood products manufacturer here in Oregon and on the West Coast. And I have the privilege of covering the Oregon region, our Oregon communities. So this has been, am I year two? This is going into year, I've been here about a year, and this group of individuals has been enjoyable to get to know and also learn from. And so I'm excited to have you and include you in the group of people I get to know.
Thanks, Courtney. Andrew Perky, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah. Hey, Joe. Andrew Perky. I'm a consultant on water resources, primarily with a small group called AMP Insights. I used to work at National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Oregon Water Trust before that. I'm here in Portland. And I think there's a couple of us. Chad, maybe Mark was an original board member. So I've been sipping 3 years, Chad. I think it's been
That's right.
that long, which is crazy. And I was appointed to represent the Northwest Guides and Anglers affiliated, but given my experience in grant making, um, I'm filling that slot or that seat, if you will. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure to be part of this group. It's been a good group, so look forward to having you on board.
Thanks, Andrew. And your experience in water rights and water rights acquisitions has been really helpful. So thanks for bringing that expertise to the group. Next, I guess I will take a minute to introduce myself. I'm Chad Washington. I'm Director of Forest Protection at Oregon Forest Industries Council. Prior to accepting the role here at the Trade Association, I was with Nuveen Natural Resources, which was a original signatory as well. So next we'll go to Mark Stern. You want to introduce yourself as Vice Chair?
Yeah, hi, Joe. Nice to see you, and thanks for your interest in being on the committee here. I think, as you know, I worked for the Nature Conservancy in Oregon for 30-some years, and then since I've been on the ODF&W's Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund, which is the slot I then occupy as one of the 7 people on the advisory committee here for the Private Forest Accord. So that's my slot or connection to being appointed and participating here. And it's been a good bunch of people with a good bunch of projects, and look forward to having your input and guidance as we go forward. So good to see you.
Great. Thanks for that, Mark. And Mark is graciously serving in the vice chair role for this committee. And then to round us out, Scott, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, Joe. I came on the board about the same time as Courtney did, so we're probably both relieved that we're no longer the newbies. So you get that to wear that hat. But my background, I was a fisheries biologist for the federal government. Did a little stint with the Forest Service, and then the last 22 or 4 years of my career was with the Bureau of Land Management around Oregon and Washington. So upon retiring, I just wasn't happy just with a cold stop. You know, you live such a purpose-driven life that you got to add some of that back in, some passion projects. And this was one of those. Was working with Trout Unlimited out of the Eugene Springfield group to get that board and that group stood back up. And so that was my connection with Trout Unlimited. And through those conversations came to find out that I think it was Kristen Rivard was the TU rep on this board, and she was terming out. And so we discussed getting me involved. And so that's how I ended up being here. So yeah, I echo everything that's been said. It's been a fun experience, a really diverse group with all kinds of expertise. So it's really enjoyable.
Great.
Well, thanks.
Scott.
I really appreciate all your introductions and getting to know you more, and look forward to working with you all.
Likewise, Joe, it'll be great when we get to our in-person meeting in October. Andy, do we have time for ex officio introductions at this point? So let's go ahead and do that as well. So Mark Granbemmer, why don't you introduce yourself, and then you can just hand it to the next one.
We always have time. I'm Mark Granbemmer. Hi, Joe. Welcome. I'm with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and I'm one of the ex officio members. I'm At OWEB, I'm one of the regional program representatives located down in Southwest Oregon. I've been with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board since its creation, and before that was with the Governor's Watershed Enhancement Board, and prior to that, the Oregon Watershed Health Program, and then prior to that, ODFW. So it gives you a little bit of flavor, but happy to have you, and you're going to like the group. We do a lot of good things.
Mark, do you want to hand it to the next ex officio?
How about Jennifer?
Sure, thanks. So I'm Jennifer Weichel, and I'm with Oregon Department of Forestry, and I'm working on the habitat conservation plan for the private forest accord. And I'm in that role as kind of a special assignment. Normally, I'm the wildlife biologist for our forest resources division. So I think we've interacted a little bit before, Joe. It was good to see you again. I'm happy to have you on this committee. And I'll kick it to, do you mind if I just have Kate Thompson introduce herself as part of this, Chad, really quickly?
That
Great,
works
thank
great,
you.
Jennifer. And since Kate might not be as familiar with the rest of the ex officio committee members, then we'll just have Kate Wells introduce herself following Kate Thompson.
Great.
Excellent. That's who I was going to kick it to because I knew her name. Hi, I'm Kate Thompson. I am working with Jennifer Weichel on the HCP at Oregon Department of Forestry. Officially, I'm the HCP tracking coordinator. And we've been working together since 2022 on this project.
Great.
Kate
Wells.
Yep. I am Kate Wells. I'm the Assistant Regional Administrator for the Oregon Washington Coastal Office for NOAA Fisheries. So we've been working with ODF on crafting the HCP and going through that process. Us with the Fish and Wildlife Service will be the ones ultimately issuing the incidental take permit. And I am Kim Kratz, if you knew him, was my predecessor. He retired in December, so I've taken over for him in this spot. He used to attend these meetings and had a lot to do with this process for many, many years leading up to where we are today. So nice to meet you. Thank you. I've lost track of who to hand it off to at this
No
point.
problem, Kate. And in fact, I think Chris Allen is not here, correct?
Yeah,
So,
he's not here. And as you said, he retired. And I have not heard about somebody backfilling that spot.
so I think that rounds us out. Is that correct, Andy? Is there anyone that
We have Jessica and myself might take an opportunity. If you don't mind, I might bring it to Jessica first.
Yeah. Hi, Joe. Good to see you. So, usually Jessica Watson. Usually, I'm in Marine Resource Program, so that's where we've interacted before many times. So, nice to see you again. Currently, I'm in a job rotation as the acting Habitat Division Administrator. So, I will be in this position until the end of the month and filling in for Sarah Reif, who's currently our backfilling for Sean Clements, our deputy director, who's really focused in on the legislative session. So we're all kind of in a little bit of a dominoes effect here while we're still in legislative session. But then Sarah will be returning as the Habitat Division Administrator. So just been really enjoyed my time with this group and so excited to have you join.
Thanks, Jessica.
I don't need to take too much time since me and Joe had a great conversation just last week. Nice to see you again. I'm the grant coordinator for the Private Forest Accord Grant Program, also the board appointed person for this committee. We do have one more ex officio who isn't here today, Sarah Gregory. She's from ODF&W also. She's down in Southern Oregon. She couldn't make it today. And with that, Chad, I think we're rounding it out. I don't think we have any other interest.
Great, thank you, Andy. And so with that, we'll continue on with the agenda. I believe the next is public comment. Have we received any requests for public comment, Andy?
Haven't received any requests, but at this time, if anyone's present and watching, feel free to raise your hand virtually. And this is an opportunity for public comment. All right, Chad. I didn't get any written requests. I haven't seen any hands raised, so I'm assuming no public comment for this meeting.
Very good. So then we can move to your staff report next, Andy.
Perfect. Great. Well, it's a pretty brief staff report today. Pretty quick meeting. There's just a few things I wanted to touch on. Three things actually. Mark asked for a quick update on our on our field trip this year, so I'll provide some touch points to that. And then some touch points on our 2024 awards for funding, where we are at with contracts on that. And then some talk about some future meeting dates to push. So that's all I'm going to talk about, and then we'll introduce the presenters thereafter. So Coos Bay field trip's going well. I'm hoping to get an agenda out soon to you guys to working and coordinating down there. Again, we're going to at least see 1 or 2 project sites in Coos Bay. The field trip will take place on October 2nd. That's the Thursday. There will be an opportunity on that Friday to tag along with me to a closeout site visit the day after if you're available. By no means required. But you'll get more information about all of that. For the primary field trip, we'll be at least going to Toledo Tidegate, which we provided a good amount of investment funding from the PFA grant program. I don't have the numbers in front of me for it, but it was a collaborative effort in the Winter Lake area down in Coos Bay, large intertidal area. So we'll be taking a tour there, looking at the tide gates, looking at what they did, talking about some challenges and relating it back to the Private Forestry Road Grant program and our priorities to the larger accord. We'll then hopefully be taking a second field trip in the region to another project we funded. That's yet to be determined, so I don't have too much info to give on that. But with that, just a reminder, Tiffany will be reaching out to all of you pretty soon to fill out some forms, some travel forms we'll have you fill out in the next few weeks here, hotel stuff, and then some dinner questions and whatnot. I do plan, just to give you guys an FYI, that Thursday, we're going to meet in the hotel lobby where we'll be staying at 8 a.m. for a 9 a.m., 8:30 to 9 a.m. departure. So it is an all-day field trip. We'll be shuttling you guys. We'll be bringing a brown bag lunch for you guys, restroom, and then water. Of course, you're welcome to bring your own snacks. We'll have a few vans so we don't all have to shuffle into one big party bus. With that, that's kind of it for the field trip. More info to come. Unless anyone has any questions on the field trip, I'm going to kind of move on to my next discussion point. Cool. Okay. Contracts are going great. Executions. So for just as a quick reminder for those on the call and were not present, we awarded funding just shy of 10 million to projects in the 2024 solicitation request for proposals. Since the April commission meeting, I've worked with each and every grantee to have a one-on-one meeting, some of which are here. It's pointing at Neil. And we've began executing contracts well in advance. So our target date was October. We're already executing them as of last month. Big shout out to our contracts department. They have been doing an amazing job just getting the ball rolling months and months ahead of schedule. We're way more streamlined than last year. I'd be hard pressed to think about areas of improvement. So that's been great. We've actually been able to tell grantees, hey, you're able to kind of get into it this season if you can fit it into the water work period if you really want to. So it's been going really good. No major hiccups or concerns from that process. I'm actually very happy with it. Any other kind of questions about the contracts in last year's projects? Okay, Jessica, and I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm going to ping to you for a legislative update before I get into talking about future meetings. If that works.
Yeah, totally. Hi, all. So just a little bit, I wanted to provide a bit of an update on ODFW's budget bill. So that's House Bill 5009. It had a work session on May 28th in the Natural Resources Subcommittee of the Joint Ways and Means Committee. During that session, the -1 amendment was adopted. And for your all's information, that included the package allocating 10 million from the general fund to the private forest accord mitigation subaccount. So these funds are continuously appropriated to the department for the PFA grant program. The subcommittee approved the bill with the amendment and it moved to the full Ways and Means Committee where it passed last Friday, June 6th. So that bill will now head to the House and Senate floors for final approval. So just wanted to give you all an update on how that's moved forward.
Thank you for that, Jessica. It's worth noting that that is half of the intended obligation, correct? So although we are grateful to have the 10 million in funding, that is half of what it should have been.
Yes, definitely want to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge that in my previous updates, we were also talking about a potential discrepancy in that amount. So it is the 10 million, which is half of what was previously allocated.
Unless there's any questions on that budget, I'll just move forward into my last topic. Cool, doesn't look like it. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious if there's any language around the 10 million, like it needs to be spent over 2 years in the biennium, or it could all be spent in the first year, or any reference to getting a second dip at the bucket, maybe in the short session next year, or is all that unspoken?
I'm unsure of that, Mark, so I don't have a direct answer, but I can definitely look into what the potential opportunities are there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To the best of my knowledge, Mark, it's just funding into the fund, and there are no additional requirements that were introduced in the -1. It was just putting monies into the fund to be following the same rule set as if it were fully funded.
So sometime later this summer, we'd presumably need, if it's finalized, decide what the fall RFP dollar amount would be, if it's some or all of it, or to be determined.
That's right.
Yeah, I think usually in September, I bring the revised RFP ahead of you guys, and that's when September, October is when we usually will discuss the time frame for application and how much we want to offer for funding, and we should be prepared at that time to let you know how much is in the account for funding across the biennium, so we can decide what that looks like for the next 2 solicitations, actually.
Right. Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions related to the budget? Who's there? Okay, great. Last topic I have, and I apologize if I didn't put this in the staff report, but it's moving some calendar dates for our next few meetings here. So sorry I didn't bring this up earlier. So we have a July meeting next month that was scheduled on the 8th. I'm proposing to move that 1 week later to the 15th. I will be out of town, and so will Jessica and a few others at ODFW. Hopefully that's okay for the committee here to move July 8th meeting to July 15th. Any concerns? I'm getting thumbs up and heads. Okay, cool. All right.
I'll be out of the country. But I think you have a quorum without me, so.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I don't anticipate any. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, the quorum we'll talk about. Next one then is going to be the September meeting. We're also requesting that is September 9th. We're requesting to push that back 1 week to September 16th, possibly.
Andy, that's we had discussed actually canceling the September meeting because we will have just had the August meeting, and then we're meeting in person in October. So I think the discussion was around canceling that meeting.
And I apologize. I thought I'd made a call and I didn't. We would have to adopt our RFP in September to an extent, like what we're going to offer. So because October, unless we make that a public business meeting, which it is currently not, it's just a field trip. If we didn't have the September meeting, yeah, we wouldn't be able to adopt the RFP for the next solicitation, was my concern. So we could at least look at that as being pushed and hold it for right now and then kind of decide an action later.
Yeah, Andy, if I was the only need to move that meeting and moving it doesn't solve any issues, then there's no need to move the meeting at all, and Mark can lead the meeting instead.
Okay, let me double check that I wasn't a part of that though also. Okay, yeah, if we can hold it then on the 9th, that would be helpful. Just in case we want to approve that RFP ahead of our October stuff.
Well, it sounds like you certainly will need to approve the RFP, not if you would like to.
Yeah, so we can hit it. Okay, so we'll hold the September date. I appreciate that. Apologies for that, Chad, and the committee for not being more clear about that up front. So the July meeting is the only one we'll move from the 8th to the 15th. You'll get that notification shortly from me. Okay. That is it for me. I don't have any more staff report updates unless the committee had any other questions at this point. Great. Okay. Thank you. Chad, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. And with that, I think we are ready for a presentation on 6 PPDQ from members of the working group. So I'll hand it over to Neil, Roy, and Katie to present on the work that they're doing.
I just wanted to clarify real quick. Katie, I didn't know if I have your presentation in that PDF format. I was happy for you to share screen though. I thought that might be easiest. Okay.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Thank you.
All right. I just wanted to give you that option. Sorry to interrupt.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much for the invite. My name is Katie Holzer. I'm with the City of Gresham as a watershed scientist. Roy and Neil, would you like to introduce yourselves first, and then I'll go ahead with the presentation?
Sure. Thanks, Katie. My name is Roy White with Multnomah County's Water Quality Program, and I'm serving as the chair of the 6PD working group with our co-founders, Katie and Neil. We have about 100 folks on our email list, representing about 70 or 80 organizations from state, federal agencies, municipalities, nonprofits like watershed councils and soil and water conservation districts, river keepers, and so forth. It's a voluntary collaborative partnership, and we're working to kind of move forward with 6PPD quinone to take action to reduce this pollutant so we can save salmon. Yep.
I'm Neil Schulman. I'm the executive director of the North Clackamas Watersheds Council. Obviously, this committee has seen our work come across its portfolio. Our territory is obviously in North Clackamas County, but really the interest in 6PPDQ is obviously statewide and wider. And we have been part of the group really since Roy kind of started getting the band together. And it's been, it's a really important factor of restoring fisheries in our watersheds, but obviously of statewide importance.
Excellent, thank you. So if you don't know what 6PPDQ is yet, that's what we'll be covering in this and how it relates to this particular group. So let me go ahead and share my screen here.
Nice, we're getting it.
Okay, great. Minimize this menu here. Excellent. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is projects that might be funded through your group to protect salmonids from toxic tire dust, which is a phrase that we're using in addition to 6PPDQ with all the letters and numbers in there. And what I'm going to be talking about today, there we go. Is first I'm going to introduce you to the toxic tire dust, what it is, where it comes from, how we know about it, and then talk about the relevance to Oregon's aquatic species and much of the work that this group does and the implications for the grantees. And as an introduction to this, it was first noticed the way that understanding this chemical came about was over the last several decades up in the Puget Sound, there were watersheds that were being restored, putting in lots and lots of time and effort and money to replace fish passage barriers, put large wood in streams, restore riparian habitat, and the salmonids were coming back into these watersheds, and then a lot of them were seen displaying weird symptoms and then dying before they could spawn. So these are some percentages from some of these creeks where more than half of these fish, they'd find the carcasses and they're still full of eggs. So the restored habitat's there, the passage is there, the stocks are there, they're trying to come back, and then something is killing them right before they can spawn, which is extremely disruptive to the life cycle, of course. And this had been sort of observed for the first time in the early 2000s, and a lot of research over many decades went into trying to figure out what was going on here. And to take those, decades of research and put it down into one slide, it seemed to be coming from urban stormwater runoff or just stormwater runoff from roads in general, where when there'd be a big rainstorm and runoff would come from roads and come into these streams, that's where the fish were dying. They were able to narrow it down that it seemed to specifically be a chemical in tires. And interestingly, they would test the stormwater for everything they knew was in there, all the known chemicals, and they would create synthetic stormwater with that. But when they'd expose fish to that, they wouldn't die. But when they exposed them to the real runoff, they would. So there was some unknown chemical in here, and it seemed to be coming from the tires. And then there was lots of brilliant lab work done to isolate this chemical that was newly described to science just about 4 years ago. And this chemical is called 6-PPD-Q or 6-PPD-quinone. And I'm going to just play a short video here to show you to give you a visual of what this looks like. So here's a high traffic road in Gresham. It's a truck route. Here's that runoff coming off of the road. The dust is coming off of the tires, all the little particles. That runoff goes down into a storm drain. And then for the most part, these storm drains don't go to any sort of treatment plant. In most places, these storm drains go directly to some water body, and often these can be salmon-bearing streams. So this is an example in Gresham where this stormwater outfall comes out right here without any treatment. You can see that dirty water coming right out of the outfall and going right into Kelly Creek, which then drains to Beaver Creek and then to the Sandy River, which is an important salmon stream. And right downstream of here is where we were also seeing pre-spawn mortality of salmon. And so just a little bit more background on this chemical in particular. Of the chemicals that have been tested for toxicity in aquatic organisms, so far this is the second most toxic compound after ever tested. The highest was DDT. So it's extremely toxic, especially to coho salmon. So the LC50, the lethal concentration of 50%, so the amount that would kill half of the fish put in that concentration is between 40 and 95 nanograms per liter. So these aren't milligrams, they aren't micrograms, they're nanograms per liter. So we're talking about extremely small levels. And there's still research going on since, again, it was only described to science a few years ago. There's still research going on about what exactly it does. This is a screenshot I took from a presentation I saw recently that's showing some evidence that the way that it's working is disrupting this blood-brain barrier that's supposed to keep toxins that might be in the blood from getting into the brain, but it increases the permeability of that barrier, and then all sorts of things can get into the brain of the fish where it shouldn't be and cause toxicity. Here's some data from Oregon that we've been collecting since this chemical was described a few years ago. We've started to take some samples. And this is a compilation of all the folks I know in Oregon who have been taking samples. And basically, this chemical is present in streams wherever road runoff reaches the streams, and often at near lethal levels near outfalls. So here's a summary of the data. So here's looking at nanograms per liter. This red line here is the coho salmon LC50. You can see the rural streams are generally below it. If they're not getting road runoff at all, they're not getting this chemical. Some of these rural streams had some detections, and those are where a road is draining directly in. The urban streams tended to be higher. These samples were mostly taken not during a storm event. There were a handful of samples that were taken during a storm event, and those are some of these outfalls up here. Or outliers up here, that when it's raining and you're somewhere near an outfall, you can get these really high levels. If you're looking at the runoff itself, not the stream, the levels are generally above the LC50, but in particular, if it's runoff from a high traffic road, because again, this is coming from the tires, so the more tires that are driving down the road and wearing off, the higher these concentrations are. Of note, we've taken some samples from high traffic roads that have been paved with porous pavement, including just an overlay of porous asphalt on top of a standard asphalt road. And that tends to cut down the amount of this chemical about 80 to 90%. We'll talk about treatment a little bit later. Also of note, though, these are all done with preliminary lab methods because the method was still in development at the time, and these are likely underestimates of the actual numbers. So to zoom into an example where this is causing a particular problem, where we could see something like a grant, making a big change, is in Beaver Creek, which runs through Troutdale and Gresham. outside of Portland. And in this is a creek that has a lot of coho and steelhead in it. And over the last several years, there have been many fish passage and stream restoration projects. There have been huge culverts replaced, millions of dollars spent on that, large wood placements with helicopters, and the fish are coming back. We're seeing the returns, but most of them, the majority of them, are dying pre-spawn. So this is the data set down in the bottom left here from the Mount Hood Community College Fisheries Program. They go and do spawning surveys in the fall of coho. And these are the survey counts from 2011 to this year. And all of these orange portions of the bars are the female carcasses that still had eggs inside of them and never got a chance to reproduce. And on average, it's more than 50% of those fish. So the fish are coming back, they're trying to use the habitat, and they're getting hit with this stormwater. This is a map of where all the pre-spawn mortality carcasses were, and they were all downstream of this particular large outfall that's in this picture here. It seemed that perhaps if the fish passed this outfall when it wasn't raining, there were post-spawn carcasses up here where they did successfully spawn. So we've done some sampling here. This is where we've seen, here's the outfall coming out, here's Beaver Creek running through, and this was a Multnomah County project to replace this fish passage barrier here. And this is where the fish are coming in and getting hit. However, one thing that's really fortunate about 6-PPDQ is that unlike many of the other pollutants that we deal with, it's relatively easy to treat. Typical stormwater treatment practices work really well. So this chemical sorbs to any organic matter, so any sort of compost or just soil in general, biochar, coconut coir, all those work. So things like typical bioretention, rain gardens, we have data on porous pavement working well, tree wells, anything, and of course, anything you can do to infiltrate that road runoff into the ground instead of getting filtered and going out, that's going to be the best. But you can also filter it with anything, like I just talked about, compost, biochar, regular old soil, coconut coir, any of that. And of note, these are my sample bottles up here from our porous pavement overlay, where this black bottle is what was coming off of the high traffic road without porous pavement. And then just half a mile away, this is my sample bottle coming off the high traffic road with a porous pavement overlay. So you can see all those pollutants getting filtered out. And it's really important to address this issue in particular because all of this good work is getting put into a lot of these streams. This is the Multnomah County project with the new fish passage. This is a new large wood placement put in by Metro Regional Government. But none of this can work and be effective if the fish are getting poisoned and they can't survive in these habitats. But it's relatively easy to do that treatment and make the water livable for the fish. And of note, this issue has caught the attention of the U.S. Senator from Oregon, Senator Jeff Merkley, and he held a hearing on this a little while ago and is watching what our group is doing and trying to figure out how to get funding for these stormwater treatment projects as well. So in terms of relevance to Oregon's aquatic species, since this chemical is still relatively new, there's a lot of testing that still needs to be done, but there has been testing on several species, aquatic species in Oregon. So this is an example of fish that have been tested for lethality, and this is the LC50. Here it's in micrograms per liter instead of nanograms, so multiply this by 1,000 to get to the numbers we were looking at earlier. But you can see that coho salmon seem to be by far the hardest hit. We also have rainbow trout and steelhead on here, as well as Chinook. And I'm adding on here at the bottom with an asterisk, coastal cutthroat trout. There's some new studies that have not yet been published but are forthcoming showing that they are also highly hit, probably similar to coho salmon. And so, as you know, there's a requirement of the PFA grant applications that all projects propose ecological uplift to at least one or more of the HCP covered species. So when you look at that list and compare it to the species that have thus far been tested for 6-PPDQ lethality, coho salmon come out at the top of that list. The coastal cutthroat trout will likely be added to it very shortly. And then steelhead and rainbow trout and Chinook salmon are all affected. So any projects that can help address 6-ppdq getting into streams that have these fish in them will help provide uplift for those species. And here's just a screenshot of the distribution map of those 4 species that I took from the web page here. And so you can see it's, many streams throughout Oregon in many places, generally not in the southeast and the center, but most of the other areas. And I was going to highlight here some work that ODFW did recently where they did a coho vulnerability assessment for the 6-ppdq. And so they did an assessment of where 6-ppdq is likely to be highest, so concentrated around these urban centers, but also along major roads. And then they overlaid that with the statewide coho salmon distribution map and came up with this draft statewide 6-ppd quinone risk assessment for coho salmon. So you can see some of the priority areas here. And because the most tires are in urban areas, that's often where a lot of this is seen. But anywhere, it's not just an urban problem. Anywhere a road drains into a fish-bearing stream, it can be a problem. So often we talk about there's some roads that go over the Coast Range that just parallel a stream or a river the whole way. And if that runoff is going into the river, that could be a big issue for the fish there. And so implications for the PFA programs, mitigation of this chemical, the 6-ppdq, can be eligible under the PFA grants program if tied to conservation benefits for one of those 4 species. And it's been noted that there's, I believe, some current litigation from tribes talking about how these outfalls may be considered fish passage barriers in a legal context. So if the fish can't get past this point, that's a barrier to their movement. So we can consider them as such. It certainly seems to be that way with the outfall that we talked about in Beaver Creek, where that's hitting many of them before they can get there, and a few can get by. So some project type examples, I'm going to just briefly talk about the types of projects that our group is working on, any of which may be eligible for these funds, although the last type is the type that typically gets funded, is my understanding. So the first is, since this is so new, there's still a lot of monitoring and data collection that needs to be done to understand what the levels are, where the priority areas are. So testing for 6-ppdq in the field, doing spawning surveys to see where pre-spawn mortality is happening, those sorts of things. The next category is mapping and prioritization. So figuring out, collecting and analyzing the GIS data to understand where the issues are and where treatment is most needed. So where are roads draining to salmon bearing streams? Where might there be room for treatment? What kind of treatment can be done? And then lastly is the actual mitigation itself. So designing and constructing stormwater treatment for 6-ppdq. And in the next slide, I'm going to go into some examples of that a little bit more. So these are examples of mitigation project types that may be able to be funded here. So there could be outfall treatment. So where that outfall is actually entering the stream, you may be able to put something there, perhaps some sort of bioretention pond or swale, filter cartridge vaults like these, where you can put compost in those filter vault cartridges and have that filter through. There could be treatment along the roadsides themselves. Maybe there's not room at the outfall, but maybe along the side of the road, you could add swales, planters. These are tree wells that we've been using a lot now in Gresham. They don't take up as much space and they don't require as much maintenance, but the stormwater runoff gets in here. Most of it infiltrates, the rest of it gets filtered. And then if you don't even have room for that, because in some places there's no room to even put something along the side of the road, porous pavement takes up the exact footprint of the road and is shown to reduce this chemical. So if you have a place that can infiltrate and you're able to put actual full depth porous pavement in there, that water can infiltrate and then none of the chemicals are getting to the stream. If you can't do that for whatever reason, it's easier and less expensive to just put a friction course of porous pavement on top, and that provides quite a bit of filtration and reduction of this chemical to filter before it goes to the stream. And if you want to follow up with any of us for more information on this chemical, things that need to be done, what sorts of projects might make sense, here's all of our emails and contact information. If you're interested in joining our working group, we have monthly meetings right now, virtual meetings the third Thursday of the month, 1 to 3 p.m. You could email Roy at the top email here to join those. And we have this webpage that you can go to see all of our resources with all of our meeting notes and presentations and everything. And that's hosted on the Triton Creek Watershed Council's webpage. And we'd love to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, Katie, thank you. That was a great presentation, really interesting. And Chad stepped away for a moment, so I'll try and help shepherd the meeting through to closing here. But yeah, any questions would be great to have. Neil, looks like you have a comment or something to add. Go for it.
Thank you. And I just wanted to really just kind of follow up on my role with the 6BBDQ working group is more on kind of the partnership level around funding and things like that. And when one of the things that we've been doing is working with Senator Murphy's office, they are developing a request that they'll be submitting in the transportation authorization package this budget cycle that will basically be trying to create a grant program out of US DOT that will fund more of these projects. That is obviously going to go through the bill sitting there on Capitol Hill. We don't know what that process will be like, but that is just something that obviously both the folks in this committee and the state in general may want to track and support if they can.
Yeah, thanks for that. Good update. Good work there. Mark Grumbrenner, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. That was really an informative presentation about something I really is not very familiar with. But is there any work being done to see the impacts on other species like mussels or macroinvertebrates or reptiles, turtles, anything like that?
Yes, I believe so. I think there are ongoing experiments with mussels and invertebrates. I don't know if Roy, you know any more than I do. I know they're starting studies on amphibians. I actually haven't heard anything about turtles yet. I could bring that up. I know that right now, so Washington State's been leading a lot of this, the Department of Ecology, and they were actually in the meeting just a couple days ago asking for which species folks thought would be most important to test next. So I could throw turtles out there as well, because I don't think I heard that.
And it's
I'm
my
sure there's a long
understanding,
line.
yeah, my understanding, Katie, that there is also some very preliminary literature research being done on its effect on people as well.
Yep, correct.
Courtney.
Yeah, Katie, thanks for coming in and walking us through the topic. In a previous life, I worked in government and some substantial infrastructure projects, and I'm looking at what we're talking about, and it feels like this is partly a targeted retrofit issue in that
Yeah.
I don't think these projects could be built today untreated before discharging. And what I wonder
Yes.
in my lens now on this advisory committee is, what are the barriers that the local jurisdictions are experiencing to get these retrofits in place? Like what Neil laughs because the list is probably really long and it starts with money. But as we're evaluating submissions and requests, sometimes we're talking through, okay, what's a reasonable cost to implement a project and what's causing the cost to inflate? And so I'm trying to get a sense of in a targeted retrofit, are some of these treatments adding 20% to the cost, or what is it doing I'll stop
To be
bumbling.
clear, I laughed because we had exactly the same conversation with Senator Murphy's staff when they were in town about 8 days ago or 10 days ago. So it's a very apt question.
Yeah, and I think, yes, you hit the nail on the head. These are targeted retrofits because new projects would already have stormwater treatment. And so that's what makes it difficult basically, is that a retrofit is much more expensive and has more constraints than if it had been designed in there in the first place to try to shoehorn something in. So often space is the biggest issue. And so if you have space to do something, then it's usually just the cost of doing it. And with porous pavement, one that we're trying to push right now, the cost actually isn't much more, but it's a risk to the jurisdiction where it can be easy to put porous pavement in a way that it won't be durable. And so sometimes jurisdictions don't want to try it because if they put it in and they end up having to repave it, then that's a big, hit to the budget. So we've been talking with Senator Merkley's office about if there could be like a contingency fund or something about if it doesn't go well, they could help with the funding. But in general, it's just the funding that the retrofits of these roads in constrained areas are expensive. So.
And I think, Courtney, what I would say to that is a lot of times for local jurisdictions, unless there is something going on like that requires a retrofit to begin with, there is no reason, there is no regulatory driver to do anything at all. So the road outside of our office, which is now paved with permeable pavement that Katie is monitoring, was already being done by the city of Milwaukee. The city was thinking ahead. It was already on the repaving schedule. But there are a lot of roads that are generating a lot of toxic tire dust and are not having any structural issues in terms of transportation safety. So the jurisdictions don't even have them on the list to do anything.
Okay, just one porous pavement without going too far here. It's interesting. The porous pavement is being done widely in other parts of the country and around the world. And it's really about kind of getting the expertise up in our local area so that engineers, contractors have experience. And so if this is a strategy, a new technique that has the potential to be widespread, that can be very effective for coho, then perhaps this is a way to kind of kickstart really this industry. And so that if Oregon as a state, and Washington too, can be the leaders in this, then this has kind of monumental impact here for the coho populations kind of around. Because you imagine the amount of existing stormwater there is, even though there are certain targeted areas like in Beaver Creek and other watersheds that we should focus on, because we know that the highest traffic roads with existing stormwater that's untreated. So this is a way for us to, as we think, and here the three of us and Merkley and others are really trying to like set us up as leaders in this thing, to like share a vision that this is worth it. This is like the problem kind of of our time, because we've known this issue of 6-PBD quinone has been around before it had a name, right? And it's been widespread since 1970. So we've been seeing the impacts. We've been investing so much restoration, and now this is the time, since we know what to do, to really have the why to really advance stormwater treatment. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Roy. I had no idea about this even existed as an issue or a problem. So the discussion's really interesting here. Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Very informative presentation, and this was definitely on our radar as fisheries biologists before I retired a couple of years ago. And at that time, I remember there was a group kind of coming at it like you are with prevention and remediation and arresting those chemicals. But there was also another group talking about approaching the tire companies and trying to get their proprietary list of chemicals and perhaps encouraging them or incentivizing using something different that doesn't, turn into 6-PPD running into streams and that nasty toxicity. Do you know anything more about the progress of that?
Yes, I do. I just heard an hour-long update on that a couple days ago from the Washington group. So yeah, actually the tire manufacturers have been extremely cooperative and on board and working with Department of Ecology and have been testing many alternatives. The last I heard, they have some, so it has to so it's an anti-ozonant for the tire. Without it, the tire degrades much more quickly, so they would need a replacement for it. So they're trying to find things that work similarly well in the tire and aren't super toxic to the fish. The last I heard, their best substitute right now is called 7-PPD, so it's a similar chemical, right? It seems to be less toxic to the fish. They're still finishing out toxicity testing there. So there is work going on, and that's necessary and good. And in the meantime, it'll be a long time before all these tires are off the road. And I think tires will never be healthy for salmon. So it'll still be important to treat stormwater and all the other pollutants that come with the stormwater. So yes, that's in the works. And I think it's important to treat these high traffic roads that drain to salmon streams.
Okay, thank you.
Katie, do you have a sense, are all tires sort of equal culprits, or some worse than others, so to speak?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I know it's basically in all tires, but I don't know if there are some, types of tires or brands that might have more than others. I don't know that. I do know that the heavier the vehicle, the more comes off because it wears tires more quickly. So like heavy trucks that have more weight produce more, and electric vehicles produce more because they're heavier, about twice as much. Just to burst everyone's bubble.
Yeah, interesting. Andy.
Thanks, Mark. I'm actually raising my hand for Joe. He's having some issues, technical issues. I'll pass it over to Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Katie, for that presentation. I really appreciate that. I have two questions. One of them, I saw the map indicating some of the estuaries in Oregon potentially are impacted by this contaminant, and wondering what you know specifically about that, because I think on one hand, estuaries would have more fish, potentially more impact as they're coming into the main waterways before they distribute, but also maybe that 6-PPD is more diluted there. I wonder if you know of any research or any information coming from estuaries right now. I know there's work going on right now to update Oregon's estuary management plans, so it seems like that should be something that should be part of the discussion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't think I've actually heard estuaries discussed at all. Roy or Neil, do you know?
I haven't, but Joe, you're right. I have heard that, the larger the road, the smaller the stream, the more impact you have on the fish that are in there. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting issue that really requires more study. We've been talking here locally about, is the urban area in Portland, is that like a bottleneck? Is this like a fish having to run the gauntlet through, Portland to get through, to their spawning areas? So it's kind of wide open right now. Yeah.
I think for the estuarine question, I mean, we, and by we, I mean mostly Katie, frankly, coordinates a lot with the Washington group that I think I'm guessing they have done more work on the estuarine connection because of all the work in Puget Sound. So I think that's the question we can kick to Eli next time we talk with him. And I do want to,
Yeah,
I was gonna say I have a list of questions for Eli now up in Washington.
I mean, on your graphic, you showed that there was, it looks like, some level of concentration detected in maybe Coos Bay, and some of the other bays were hard to see in the graphic because of the size of the map. But so I assume there's been some sampling there.
Let me clarify. This isn't based on samples at all. As far as I know, I've taken about 24 samples, and 2 other people have taken about 12 samples in Oregon.
Oh, okay.
So this is
I can't see it.
This is a model based on road density.
Oh,
so I think that's just showing there are some coastal
Gotcha.
roads and some towns there.
Okay, so there's been no sampling of estuaries. Okay.
Not in Oregon. Washington may have done sampling in estuaries.
Okay.
And I think from like the standpoint of like a council like ours that is trying to really get to the point, right, as quickly as we can on what are our priority projects, what we really are going to be looking to do, because testing is so new and there is no baseline, is to really be doing a lot of desktop analysis that says, where are these outfalls, where that are untreated, where give us the road data, where's the most traffic, the most trucks, the highest speeds, and that's going to be our the beginnings of our kind of at least initial cut of prioritization while this program gets up, while the knowledge base build, but we don't want to wait till we know everything because obviously we can't afford to do that.
All right, thanks. My second question was just, and maybe you mentioned this during the presentation, I missed it, but does the 6 ppdq break down over time? Is there any information on like how that breaks down?
Yes and no. So it has a relatively short half-life on the order of weeks rather than, millennia or something like some of these toxic chemicals. But what's not known much is what it breaks down into. So the chemical itself is not detected anymore, but we don't yet know what it breaks down into and if that's less toxic.
All right, thank you.
Scott.
Yeah, just one more. You got me thinking now with your prioritization and the mapping that you just showed, and I was curious if anybody had factored in habitat intrinsic potential specifically for coho, where it tracks really well with streams with high HIP or high IP produce quite a few more fish than streams that are low IP, for example. And so just another factor that might be useful in terms of the triage that you guys are starting. There's a lot out there to deal with. So,
can you, what did you say that was, high or low?
Intrinsic potential. And ODFW should have those maps. It's mapped fairly down to the fine scale. So you can get a 1 or 2 mile reach that is extremely high in production because it's HIP. And if there's a toxic outfall below it, boy, that would flag as super important to address before another, perhaps.
Yeah, that would be, that's a great idea. Because something that I've been thinking about, one reason that Washington's so much farther ahead is they had these really visible die-offs in the middle of Seattle and Tacoma that people could see. And in Oregon, we're hearing, well, we don't really see that pre-spawn mortality. Maybe it's not happening here. Maybe it's not a big deal. And something I think about a lot, Johnson Creek that goes through Gresham here, we're lucky if we see 2 adult coho in our spawning surveys every year now, and there's very few. But I've talked to a couple of old timers here who said when they were boys, they remembered the entire stream being choked with salmon in the fall. And so at some point between then and now, these populations crashed. And maybe it was this chemical, maybe it was a combination of other things, but maybe that's why we're not seeing it now. Like it already happened and there's nothing left to see. And those 2 that do come up are both pre-spawn mortality, right? So it would be great to have a map of what could be here if the water was clean.
Yeah, really interesting and fascinating presentation. Thank you all to the work for that, Katie, Roy, and Neil. It's obviously the map and the interest overlaps pretty tightly with a lot of the species that we're involved with the private forest accord. So really timely and relevant and pertinent. Have you guys talked with ODOT about it? Has it come up in their conversations yet?
Yeah, they're on our steering committee as well for the group. So yeah, and they have a whole subgroup and funding mechanisms as well. So
yeah, good.
I think the other thing that this committee might just kind of keep in mind as we move forward is really these kind of retrofit projects. I can't speak to the PFA program, but in a lot of other funding sources, they struggle to compete. Just because the cost for implementing a retrofit project can be pretty high. And, but we were going to say, let's say, they don't compete well, for instance, within OWEP, open solicitation programs. I mean, typically the reason is they just don't pencil out on a cost per project. And it's very difficult to quantify in the same way that putting in a lot of large wood or reconnecting a side channel might. So I think one of the challenges of this issue is it is obviously critical to recovering the species, but it hasn't really found a funding slot for it yet.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I could see how it'd be difficult. I would also say though that you have some pretty convincing cost benefit sort of response that the chemical is so deadly in some of those situations where you do have die-offs or you've shown the mortality right below the outfall. That's pretty convincing. And I'm all a fan of large woody debris, but it's sort of hard to show that large woody debris here had X result or Y result too. So I'd encourage you to stay with it because I think your argument and presentation was pretty compelling.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track too. I think one of the slides you mentioned that perhaps it was the tribes, I think, that considered it a fish passage project. And so I'd encourage you to continue along those lines and put, perhaps the miles of stream, opened up to successful spawning versus not, absent this project. So, because you were spot on.
Excellent, thanks. And for the Beaver Creek watershed, we recently did an exercise where we sort of penciled out what it would take to retrofit all of the high traffic roads in the watershed. And I mean, it was on the same order of magnitude as the culvert replacement projects that have been done in that watershed if you added them together. So it's doable.
Courtney.
Yeah, I've also appreciated this conversation. So in speaking to us as a advisory committee, I think, I have a little bit of a heart for some of these infrastructure projects in communities like this, and something we struggled with, and maybe we can remember as we prepare for the next round, was these questions coming in from local communities and kind of a sense that, well, they were going to do these projects anyways because they needed to put in a sewer lateral or something. And I think for me, the takeaway is something we heard on this, which is, yes, because local communities have to do multiple things when they do one project. There's kind of this pressure that an infrastructure project must solve 3 problems. They can't just open up a road for one problem. And so I think it's just a flag as we think about future applications, that reminder that public projects have to be multiple solutions in one cut, and this is one of those additional needs in there. So I'm soapboxing.
Appreciate it.
Well, Courtney, we'll rely on you to be part of the local infrastructure voice as we go forward in these projects. Other comments, thoughts, or questions on this? Oh, well, again, Katie, Roy, Neil, thanks for taking the time today and sharing that with us. I think it was enlightening for all of us. So we'll look forward to hearing more about it as we go forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you for the time.
As we move on here, we have closing comments. And so I just open the floor. If there's any comments any of the advisory committee or ex officio members would like to share with the group for today. I guess seeing none, we can move forward. Andy, any last thoughts, or Jessica?
No, thank you for the time, everyone. Just a reminder, you have the next meeting was pushed 1 week. That should already be on your calendar. Thanks. Back to you, Mark.
All right, so July 15th, I think that's the next one, and we'll go from there. So thanks all. If you have questions or concerns, feel free to get a hold of Chad, myself, or Andy, and we'll roll forward.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye now.